breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Light of the world, you stepped down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow. altogether wonderful to me. I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross, and I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross, and I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
Hi there, welcome to another edition of R&R. My name is Kevin Barnett, and I am the youth minister here at this wonderful place we call Sugar Grove Church of Christ. And I'm excited to be with you again this evening, or whenever you're watching this, to really continue our conversation that we ended last week about remembrance stones. And don't worry, if you weren't with us, I'll make sure and catch you up. So last week we were looking at the Israelites, and they had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and God was leading them to this place that He promised them to be, and we see God do a miraculous thing in their life. And obviously the Israelites, we know that He's done a ton of miraculous things in their time with God, but yet this one seems to be really important. He stops the Jordan River from flowing so that the whole nation of Israel can cross over. And Joshua, who's leading the group at the time, says, we need to remember this moment. And God places it in his heart to do that. And so he asks the people to pick up these stones and to set them at the place where the Jordan was stopped. And it was this moment that Scripture tells us that generations to come we're going to hear about the faithfulness of God because of these big rocks that were sitting at the river base. And it's crazy to me to think that just this little piece of faithfulness is going to impact generations to come, and even us, as I know some were encouraged by what was shared last week. And I left you with a challenge. And the challenge was to really look at your life and say, what are my remembrance rocks? What are the things in my life that I can look to and say, man, that's God's faithfulness right there? What are some things that have happened, big things, small things, where you can look to and tell your children and your children's children or your friends or your relatives or your coworkers that this is God's faithfulness right here. This is how He's worked in my life. This is what gets me through the hard times. Because we left you with this, that remembering what God has done helps us trust Him even when we can't see what He's up to. That's the big idea we want to get across last week. And what I realize is that it's on the surface, it seems very simple. Hey, remember. Pick these remembrance rocks and look back at them and say, man, this is God's faithfulness in my life. But I can't help but to think that there are different parts of our life, or even just an uneasiness and unsettledness that pulls us and puts these setbacks in our lives. And so I want to address a couple of those so that we can continue to encourage you to find these remembrance stones, because I think they're so important in the life of a believer, to have these things to look to say, man, God, you are good, and I trust you even when I don't understand what's going on. And so we're going to talk about these setbacks and how we kind of overcome them. But before we get there, I wanted to share a unique opportunity I have coming up. this weekend I am heading to Washington to officiate a wedding for some dear friends of mine, and I'm so honored to have the opportunity. It's the only second wedding I've ever done, and the cool thing about this, the unique thing about this specific wedding is it's the first time I've got to do premarital counseling, which obviously I'm 5 years in, so I'm pretty much an expert. So as if you're married, you know. And so it was a really cool opportunity to go through. We did this assessment, and what it ended up being is a lot of reflection. It took a lot of reflection from the couple, taking a step back, looking at the relationship, looking at themselves. They had to answer a bunch of questions. And then because of that reflection, we were able to come back and discuss what kind of spouse they were going to be, what they brought into their marriage relationship. How do you handle conflict? All these things that only happen because they were able to take a step back and reflect on themselves and each other to really have these important conversations. And what these conversations led to is a lot of moments of realization of what good things are going to happen and what they need to really focus on, and then the challenges that are going to come up. And it's because of that reflection that they're able to remember these things. And the hope is that as they continue to grow and mature in their relationship, as they get married and further on, that they are going to remember these moments that they talked about these things, so that they can be better to each other. And I think I couldn't help but think about this idea of reflection and how important it is in our walk with Jesus. Because sure, we can set these remembrance stones and it's great, but how do we get to the remembrance stones? I gave you the easy one, which was if you're a professing believer in Jesus and you believe what he did on the cross, then the biggest stone for you is Jesus' sacrifice. But where do we go from there? What else can we put in there? And I think the best way to get to finding our stones is to really be reflective. And that means being reflective daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, etc. It means really taking the time to step back and assess our life and say, where is God working in the midst of what I'm doing? But like I said before, there are setbacks. And I don't want to say excuses because I know y'all wouldn't say that you wouldn't make these as excuses. So we're going to call them setbacks because I love you too much to assume that you're excuse making, right? So I think they're setbacks because they hold us back from truly seeing God's hand in our life. And that's the goal. That's what we want. We want to be able to look and say, man, I saw God work in all these different avenues. But we start with our first setback. And I think it's probably the most common, and it's this: nothing crazy or special has happened in my life to be a remembrance stone or rock, right? And I think this is even more apparent to someone who might be a believer their entire life or have grown up in the church and say, I don't know any different. And so you look, and this happens when you hear these crazy testimonies where it's like, I was going to die, and then God plucked me out right before I was going to jump, and here I am. And you look at these like, I don't have that crazy story. I don't have that huge remembrance stone. I always, ever since I can remember, I've loved Jesus. And that's huge. To stay faithful to this relationship for that long, that's a remembrance rock in and of itself. But I think that we look at our life and we say, man, my life isn't very special. There's nothing truly remarkable that I can look at. And that was the importance of looking at the rock that said, I got out of bed in the morning. Because it's important for us to celebrate and enjoy the little things that God gives us, the gifts, the new mercies he gives every morning. And so to the person that might be feeling this way, I want you to know this, that God works in what you perceive as the mundane. That even in the littlest things, even the littlest moments, like I got out of bed, I drove to work, and I hit every green light. I didn't hit a red light on my way to work. And if I did, I was going to be late. Well, that's a mercy. That's great. Maybe it's not a remembrance rock, but that's something to celebrate. It's something to be thankful for. Maybe it's an encouraging note from a boss or a coworker that's just saying, hey, good job. That's a gift. Even in these little mundane moments, God is working in the midst of it. And these are moments that when we sit down at the end of our day and we reflect on what happened, we want to celebrate those things. And so know that God works in the miraculous, but he also works in the mundane. And we got to be willing to search for those things so that we can truly see God's faithfulness in our life. So that's the first setback. I think the second setback is this: I'm busy. If I don't die or nothing major happens, good or bad, I'm thankful. And before we move forward, I want to say this, that I don't think anyone necessarily is saying, well, I'm busy. I don't think we naturally do that, because we might feel guilty about saying things like that. But what we do is we get to a place where we start to fill our time with things that aren't God. We know that we need to take time with him. We know we want to reflect. We want to take moments to sit. But instead we sit and we watch television, or we sit on our phones, or we go to a bunch of social gatherings. And before we know it, the hours that we had open to dedicate, or even the 10-minute slot that we had open, we've filled with something else. And this isn't a knock. Sometimes the church can go on this like tyrant and this thing of like, oh man, if you're not this, you're not a good Christian. This isn't a checklist thing that we do. But this is a way that we can honor God's role in our life and honor his love and his care that he's given to us. And the way that we can do that is by reflecting. And true reflection rehashes the day to see what God was doing, so that we can continue to grow in Jesus' likeness and character. It's a big Christianese word we call sanctification. And we want to get to a place where we don't look at our day and say, nothing good or bad happened, it was just fine, I'm thankful for that. While that's great, and we want to honor those moments. We want to say, hey, I didn't lose my job, but I didn't have this over-the-top mountain-high moment. Things were pretty status quo. I'm very thankful. Sure, we can be thankful for those things, but that's not true reflection. True reflection is really looking at our day and saying, where were you in the midst of it? And Jesus is no stranger to being busy. And Jesus is no stranger to the temptation of being busy, and staying busy is more how I want to say that. Because he had a lot going on. And the decisions he makes in his ministry, I think, are staggering. And so we're gonna put up on the screen 6 moments. I'm not gonna read them all, but I'll put the verse references and I'll talk about them real fast. But 6 moments where Jesus chooses solitude or reflection time with God over people. We see these things. We see Jesus go in solitude to prepare for a major task. We see Jesus go into solitude over people to recharge after hard work. We see Jesus go into solitude for reflection to work through grief. We see him go in for reflection before making important decisions, before times of distress, and to focus on prayer. And I think it's safe to say that Jesus was a busy man. And when I say busy, I mean it in the best way possible. Because Jesus' ministry was culture changing. The way that he loved people and was there at the right time with people was nothing more than God's faithfulness for humanity. And yet, I think we can make the argument that Jesus didn't have time to reflect and take solitude with God. I think you could look at the situation and say, well, Jesus, think of how many people you missed out on seeing because you wanted to go have some quiet time and take a nap, or to sit with God and reflect. But what we see is that Jesus thinks that it's important. And we know that God works and gives these divine appointments in the life of his people. And so Jesus talked to the people he needed to talk to. I'm not making the argument that somehow he missed out on people that God didn't want. Because if God wanted it, it would have happened. But what we see here is that even in the midst of the temptation to be busy, for busy's sake, and the temptation to go and do and do and do, so that people would look at Jesus like, Jesus, man, you're doing a lot. Where we would look at it and say, man, yeah, I'm so busy. I'm the best, aren't I? Jesus looks at the situation and says, no, I need time to reflect. I need time to be alone. Whether that bit was through prayer, through reading, through just silence, whatever that looked like, I can't imagine. I would love to be in that space to see those conversations, that reflection that Jesus had with the Father. Because not only did he leave those moments recharged, but he left with a growing sense of his mission on earth. That he left with a growing understanding of what he was there to do, that the kingdom work that was going to take place in his life. Because of these moments, these 6 moments and the moments that aren't written about in Scripture as well. The fact of the matter is that to be more like Jesus, we need to take time to reflect with God. To be more like Jesus, to become more like Jesus' likeness and character, which is the goal. We want to go out and follow the great commandment to love God and to love others. If we truly want to do that first step is to take time to reflect and look at our life and love God in that moment, so that when we leave from that place, we're recharged enough to go and love others. And so the last setback is this, and you might be even feeling this right now. Kevin, what do I do? How do I do this? Where do I start? And I think this is important because ultimately it comes down to this simply not knowing where to start. Because the thing is that self-reflection is a spiritual discipline. It takes dedication and practice to find a rhythm that works best for you. I'm going to give some suggestions, and you might work nights. And so when I say, hey, before you go to bed, that might not be nighttime to you. That might not work for you, because you're working or whatever. You got to find a rhythm that works for you. It very well could be when I'm in the shower, I have moments of reflection, because it's the only moment in my entire day where everything is completely quiet and silent in my house. Great. That's the moment that you're going to take to reflect and to be with God and to really focus in on what he's doing, so that in turn we can find these moments to remember forever. Because I'll get to that in a second. I want to read this passage because Paul really sets the stage for what reflection might look like. At the end of Philippians, in chapter 4, he says this, starting in verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. Do what you have learned and received and heard from me and seen in me, and the peace and the God of peace will be with you. I love the way that the CSB puts this, that of all these things that you should dwell on these things. And you might look at this and say, man, that seems really simple. It is. It is when you break it down this way, that when I look at my life, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, whatever moral excellence or praiseworthy, that we should dwell on these things. We should look at our life and we should celebrate the wins, which might be hard for people. Sometimes we don't want to celebrate ourselves. But when God is doing a work in us, when we are following the great commandment, when we are doing things like Jesus would do in the world, it's okay to be stoked about it, to use a Southern California lingo for you. It's okay to be excited about it. It's okay to say, man, God, you're good. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this moment to really see what you see, to interact with people with purpose. That's great. And to get more practical, I want to leave you with some questions that you can ask at the end of your day or whenever you choose to reflect on your week or on your month, on your day, whatever that looks like. Here's some questions that you might ask yourself to really wrap your mind and start to see, hey, where is God's hand in the midst of my day or my week or my month or my year? Simple questions. What did I do right today? Where could I have done better? Am I satisfied with what I'm doing? And that question isn't like a personal thing. Am I satisfied with what I'm doing? Am I satisfied with my attitude? Am I satisfied with how I'm living my life and showing myself to others? Is my life orchestrated in such a way to make my relationship with God a priority? Did I enjoy a few personal victories at home, at work, at school, in relationships, in my walk with Jesus? These are questions that start to, you start to write them down. You start to put them in a notebook, and you start to see, man, God was really in the midst of these. God was really in that win at work today. Man, thank you. And it gives us this heart of gratitude. See, in the youth ministry, we do this weekly. We sit down in our small group rooms, just like the one we're sitting in now. They sit in a circle, 6 feet apart. And the first thing we ask them is to give a high, a low, a high for their week, a low for their week, and a way that they've seen God work in their life. And we don't do this as a rote thing. I don't expect them to give the same answer every time, but what we're trying to instill in them is that we need to reflect on our day and see where God is working, where God is in the midst of their day. Because what we start to notice that if God can show up in the mundane, if God can show up in the day-to-day, what more could he do in these huge moments where I'm stepping out in faith, where I'm stepping out and doing something that's completely out of my comfort zone? If I know God's going to show up at school or at work, then how much more is he going to show up when I want to talk about him to someone else? Or when I want to do something that's completely out of my comfort zone. It's the best way to gain encouragement in our walk with Jesus. And as we see him working in our lives, then we can start to model our lives after the way that he's been working. And like I said before, we grow in his likeness and his character. And then Sugar Grove Church of Christ becomes this place that is so countercultural to what's going on in the world because Jesus is so alive in our midst and is working, and this great commandment is not something that was just words on a page, but something we live out. That it's lived out so much in this place that people look at us and say, what's going on over there? Why are you so different? And it's in those moments we get to talk about the wonderful gift of Jesus and the love that God showed his people, that even though they were enemies to him, that he still found them worthy enough for relationship, that he would send his one and only son to die on a cross so that we might live. So Sugar Grove, I hope this is encouraging to you. I hope that you can take time, even tonight or whenever you watch this, shut this off when it's over, grab a notebook, and just hash out your day. If you're watching this in the after, hash out the first half of your day. Do it right now, because if we push it, it'll never happen. So do it right now. Ask yourself these questions and see how God works in miraculous ways. Hope you're doing well. Can't wait to see you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.